life is really hard for people who are obese. And by hard, I mean both the social consequences of that and the health consequences of that. Right down to the fact that those who are very obese are not going to live as long as others. What makes me frustrated, bordering on angry, is that this is preventable. This is not one of those unfortunate acts of nature that we just have to accept as reality. This is not the product of a tsunami.
The weight of the nation is not healthy. And to get it healthy, we're all going to have to do our part. All of us have to be part of the solution to reduce obesity in this country. Otherwise, we're going to be faced with steadily increasing healthcare costs and the lives that are lost from cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other problems.
How many people in this society are able to maintain a healthy weight? A third or less. Something's wrong with this picture.
Levels of obesity in the United States have increased in alarming ways. In the 1980s, the Centers for Disease Control began putting together maps showing levels of obesity state by state, and then they went through the years. And every time a state changes colors, it suggests increasing levels of obesity.
When you look at the rates of adult obesity from 1960 until 2008, you can see that the rates were moderate and relatively consistent over time. But then starting in the 1980s, we saw a rapid increase resulting in the current level, which is fully over a third of adult men and women in the United States are obese. But it's the morbid obesity where we've seen the most striking increase from 1988 until 2008.
We have childhood obesity at levels where people aren't denying it anymore. So it is a teachable moment. When it was only adults or only people in less valued groups, you could put it aside. It's those people. But when it's children, you can get a conversation going.
People who are poorer tend to have higher rates of obesity. So if you look back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there's a linear relationship between poverty and obesity. But if you look more recently, from 2005 to 2008, everybody's rates have gone up. And being wealthier is not nearly as protective against obesity as it used to be.
There is some regional variation, but it's all different degrees of terrible. The levels are so high everywhere that every state has to pay attention to this issue. The healthcare costs, not to mention the human burden, are very high in every corner of this country and increasingly every corner of the world.
Obesity is an enormously complex problem with inputs from several places. Genetics is one. We know that about 60 to 70% of the risks of obesity are heritable ones.
When it comes to obesity, for the vast majority of people, there's no one gene that makes a difference. There's many, many genes, dozens, perhaps hundreds, each of which has a small effect on the obesity in the population, but which add up to a susceptibility when exposed to this environment we live in for getting more overweight or not.